Welcome to Eliot's Law. You know by now it's the place where When Black Men Talk is produced. I'm Mark Elliott, your host, and I want to welcome you on in. Feel comfortable. Start to move around a little bit. If you need to move the furniture around, don't hesitate. Feel free to do such. This episode, we're going to do Up from the Ashes, and as I basically might have said to you a couple of prior episodes, for the most part, it's another segment that we start here When Black Men Talk. And Up from the Ashes basically give someone to come in and share their story. And throughout their story, we basically kind of see how God has basically carried them from one point to another, in reality, giving God the glory. It's interesting because the gentleman that I have on for this episode years ago, him and I were going out to lunch and just basically having conversation. And the conversation leaned into him speaking of how he was raised and where he was raised. And I remember sitting there in awe and listening, and I said to him, then I'd like to get you on the show. Well, things happened where shortly after, I think COVID kicked in, some things different happened. And we've been in contact, but never been able to really kind of come forward. Now, a few months ago, as I stated a couple episodes ago as well, the idea came to me to do Up from the Ashes. And when it came, I wasn't sure how to really put it together. And over a period of time, God gave it to me to do it this way. And ironically, I think back to that day of the conversation with this gentleman really set the stage early on for what I'm doing today. When I say doing today, meaning Up from the Ashes. So I want to welcome in Sir Garth, I call him. He's a good friend. and basically, welcome to where he should have been 4 or 5 years ago. How you feeling, man?
Hey, Mark. Listen, man, thanks for having me on, I'm glad to be honored that you asked me to do this and be glad to tell my story. If it inspires or helps anyone in any way, that'd be fantastic.
Beautiful, man. That's what I love about doing this because you never know what you might say that basically help or inspire someone else. Because a lot of times we're going through things or we're feeling things, we think we're isolated and just us and not at all other people experience. But I want to go back to way back, Sir. Let's go back to where you were born, and let's start there. And we'll work our way up, sir.
Yeah, so I was born in Jamaica. I was born in Jamaica in the '60s. Actually, that's the 1900s and '60s, and Jamaica itself had just become a sovereign nation. Just gained its independence from at the time one of the world's premier colonial powers from Great Britain, and so the atmosphere in which I grew up is affected by that because my grandfather himself had just returned from England. I don't know if you remember where England had put out a call to all its colonies right after World War II just to help come rebuild London, which had, just suffered through a lot of the war. So my dad was there post-war, my granddad rather, we call him daddy, but he was our grandfather, was there post-World War II rebuilding London. And then he retired back to Jamaica. And he was the one raising us because shortly after that, my dad left Jamaica to find a better life. Things were rough in Jamaica, not just because we were a very young, nascent little democracy, socialized democracy, trying to hold each other up, but we were caught in some political winds. We were being tossed around like a football between superpowers of the day that because we were so close to Cuba geographically and some feared ideologically that we had superpowers intervening in our economy, destroying it. I just remember the abject poverty of so many people, and it would happen overnight. It's not like this was always the case. You know something happened, and you don't, as a kid, you don't know what happened, but you'd be the one going to the stores and realizing that a pound of sugar used to cost 8 cents, and then overnight it was 50 cents. And just no explanation as to why that's happening. And that wasn't some force of nature. That was like someone's intentionality to really cause the people to suffer and affect the democracy we had. So growing up in Jamaica, it was tough.
Okay. I heard you say your father left. Let's go back there. How old were you when your father left Jamaica?
So my mom and dad were married to each other for several years. I was the last one of that marriage, so I was only 2 years old. I was the one who didn't actually Apparently, he was around, but I don't remember him. At 2 years old, he left the country, and things weren't going so great in the marriage itself. But he said, to hear his version, he had a master plan to make a better life for all of us. But that didn't translate necessarily on the ground. That was it's
Hmm.
a wonderful pipe dream, but it was tough growing up with a mom and 7 kids. I was the seventh of seven, and just she was a teacher. So feeding 7 kids on a teacher's salary, even though she was considered a civil servant, things were hard. And the weird thing is, like, I didn't even realize how poor we were because I saw so many other people poorer than us. My mom had a steady job, and it was a government job, and she qualified for certain, social programs and so on. But I never appreciated just how bad things were, simply because I would look down and there'd be people way like 2 stories, figuratively, below where we were in the society. And of course, there were people still above us doing well enough for themselves, but it hit everybody, and it hit everybody hard. And so now that I'm older and I have a sense of geopolitics, I realize, wow, how effectively you could punish entire sovereignty for not like following your lead when you're a superpower. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's stuff I saw firsthand. Literally, we don't make a single gun in Jamaica, and there were just guns being shipped in by political parties to give to people to intimidate other people to not vote a certain way. And and yet it was kind of, in quotes, a democracy, but it was tough to see that.
Hmm. I'm curious listening to you, how was the education at that point? Because with all that's going on, here the guns coming in, how
Yep.
was the educational system?
So being a teacher, my mom being a teacher, it was, listen, subsequent to that, I've actually visited Haiti, and a friend of mine is starting schools down there and clinics down there. And she says it's hard. It's hard when every member of the family is in survival mode. It is hard to have able bodied kids, even though we're kids, hard to have us have the luxury of sitting in school, learning while there are no jobs, or certain things that are important that we need for survival at the time just gets cut off, or you're embargoed, or whatever. So the education, in terms of, there was a drive, a passion for education. Actually, Jamaica at one time had one of the highest literacy rate in the entire Caribbean. So education was a premium nationally, and just as a national pride. But still, we had a fair amount of kids and so on. Just they could not afford to go to school. Child labor was almost a necessity for survival for many. But my mom being a teacher, it was a priority for us. Like, we go to school hungry, we'd go to school near barefooted, we go to school if it flooded, which was not uncommon. She just drilled that in us. Education is the way out, basically. Education is so there was no question. And it was really interesting because later on I came to live with my dad, and I learned his philosophy, and I realized probably why my mom was so strident about all of us getting an education, finishing our education, all of that. There was just such a militance that she had about it. And then nationwide, it was similar. I mean, the education was considered free, but you still needed funds on a personal level to buy the textbooks and to get ahead. I remember hearing my brother describe how he studied for. So we used to have something called GCE, the General Certificate of Education. It's a British leftover thing. And we've gotten rid of that since, but you had O levels, ordinary levels, and then A levels. Like, we wouldn't necessarily just go right on to college. You just have, after high school, you would study on your own. And my brother described how he would borrow, because even Xerox was a luxury, like copying a book from
Hmm.
someone. He would borrow books from somebody else who had gone through it. Um, and you were lucky to know somebody else who had study material. And he would study under a street lamp. He would go out to the street
Wow.
corner under a street lamp, sitting on steps, studying for his A levels, his O levels, and his A levels.
Hmm. Wow. Let's go back to where you spoke of. I remember this when you spoke of your mother or coming to the United States with your father. Let's
Hmm.
go back to previous to that time of the age you were and what
Mm,
happened where you came from Jamaica to what brought you from
gotcha.
Jamaica at that time to the United States.
Well, it wasn't a direct trip, so I didn't come from Jamaica to the United States. But I was so much of this time I was growing up in Jamaica. I left Jamaica when I was 13, and my mom by now was actually in the Bahamas, and she was working as a teacher in the Bahamas, getting paid easily three times more what she was getting paid in Jamaica. And so by then, my older siblings were kind of on their own. They were working their own jobs. And my mom sort of was sitting down now to say, okay, now that we're generating more than one income, I'm going to help bring you guys up. And I remember even my sister at the time and one of my older brothers explaining that no, like we're taken care of, like you should take the two youngest ones. And so it was a decision, like the siblings, I mean, they just looked out for us in a way that I cannot describe. Some of my older siblings, they became like the surrogate parents. And I remember it's just decided that I remember my sister taking me to get my photograph taken, and it's strange how little rights you had, but you were still taken care of, And I don't remember anyone explaining to me, look, we're getting you your passport picture so you can, like, nobody told me that.
Hmm.
It's just, in retrospect, saying it out loud, it's absolutely hysterical, like the conversations I would have with my kids. But I was 13. The summer of my 13th year, we were running around barefooted. It was a summer vacation. We'd summer up a different part of the island and running around with friends, coming back from the beach, all of that stuff. And at this point, my dad was in the U.S. And my mom was in the Bahamas. And I remember her coming by, and it was like, "Hey, hi, how you doing? Good to see you." And then she was just like, okay, get your things. And I don't know what that means. I thought we were going back to where we'd normally go to school. So somewhere between second form, the British system, has first form to, you leave primary school after the sixth grade, and then you go to first form all the way up to sixth form. Um, and so I thought we're going back now to do third form. So we just finished second form. And she just said, get your stuff. And we got into a minivan and we drove to Kingston, which is where you'd catch the bus to go to Westmoreland, which is where we lived. But it didn't go to the usual route. It just took us to the airport. And she didn't even tell us we were leaving the country. So 13 years old, I got on the plane with some summer clothes I was just running around in and flew to the Bahamas. Just
Mm-mm-mm.
and so the next thing we were landing later that evening in a brand new country, and it's just interesting, like what I noticed that made me realize it was a different economy. Just things you notice. I noticed things like the cars, the newness of the cars, the quality of the cars, the quality of the roads.
Hmm.
One of the first thing that made me realize this is a wealthier place was ironically the newspaper. The the dot font on the newspaper. First of all, the pictures were not just black and white; they were color pictures. So this was 1980. I was 13 years old, and I just remember looking at the newspaper and go, "We don't have newspaper with that kind of picture resolution."
Hmm.
I just noticing little things like that. So went to the Bahamas, went to school there. That's where my mom was teaching for a while, and from there she just notified my dad that, look, you need to step up. So he said he'd be willing. He'd be willing to send money to help out with the schooling since he found out we were going to. At that point, she was actually teaching at a private school, Sunderland Lutheran School. It was a private school. It was here's a predominantly black country, and basically this was a school of 70% white kids. So
Hmm.
if you lived in the Grand Bahama at all, and you were visiting because you were some business person and you were white, you chances are you sent your kid to this school, and it was not a small school. And my mom got a job there and it paid well, and she could afford to have two of her kids attend tuition free. And so I guess she was in contact with my dad, and he said he'd send money. And my mom just took the address one day and put us on a plane and said, "Go to this address and call this number when you land." And so that's how we wound up in New York.
Man. Hang on.
God's
I want
honest
to
truth.
go.
It's just weird when you say it out loud, though. It's just.
No. Okay. I want to zero in on this picture because it said picture represents 1,000 words. But so your mother was in the Bahamas. May I ask this real
Yes.
quickly? How long was your mother in the Bahamas before she brought you to the Bahamas?
I think she was there for a year or two, most about
Okay,
2 years. Yeah,
about two
yeah.
years. Okay.
hmm
So after her being there for a year or two, she brought you there. And when you say within how long before you boarded a plane to come to America from the Bahamas after she
Exactly a
brought you?
year and 8 days later.
8 days.
Yeah, a year and
Oh
eight
yeah.
days. I
Oh
think I
yeah.
have it down to the. It was like the
Okay.
difference of like August 28th and or it was maybe it was late August, and then basically the last day of August is when we landed. Like first. Yeah, my mom moved in somewhat mysterious ways. She would just make decisions, and there's 7 of us. There were no roundtable discussions. All right, it just
Okay.
she decided, and yes, ma'am. Because I listen. Just when survival was at issue, I think we just learned to trust her in that way, and she was supreme and sovereign in in
Okay.
her decision making. And honestly, by the time I came around, I appreciated just how much stress she was
Hmm.
under. I could
Okay.
see it. All of us saw it, and I remember my brother just trying to get a job just to help out and all that. But I didn't have an agenda enough to. I see people protest certain decisions. I'm like, good for you. You have the luxury of protesting as if there's a plan B, which is like, yes, man. I was not happy about coming because I felt like I was just kind of hitting my strides there in the Bahamas. I was at the top of
Hmm.
the class. I'd won the science fair. My brother also won the science fair in his class. I felt like I got this right.
Hmm.
I'm doing well in the school. It's a new culture, food every day as opposed to because back in Jamaica there are times, man, both parents out of the country, you're being raised by people that are not even family. Not every day was dinner. Not every day was a meal. So that
Yeah.
so I kind of like even though I was in the Bahamas and I'm not, I wasn't attached to the Bahamas. I don't know anything about it per se. I just felt like I'm hitting my stride. I'm doing well in school, like this, and
You know, it's interesting because I'm listening to you, and from where your mother did an awesome job. Let me say that to start now,
oh yeah,
but
God rest her soul.
I'm listening to where you just said basically there's times where dinner may not have been there, other people, and you're away from your parents for a period of time, and
Absolutely.
I've known you for a period of time.
Mm,
If you never said this to me, I would not have no idea. I look at you as the
mm,
man that you are, the man you became. Sir Garth, I would have no idea. And I say that to say this when I say about Up from the Ashes, that's where it resonates. But
mm.
also, I look at other people that would have everything that you didn't have.
Right,
And
right.
they're complaining and they're moping and they're groping and it's like shut up. You know what I mean? Sometimes shut up because
Yeah,
those are the ones that kind of stand out and they complain all the time.
yeah.
Woe is me. So I wanted to kind of stress that.
You know,
Now,
go on,
please,
go
yeah,
on.
no,
I'm
please,
listening.
no, 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 please, you continue, please.
I heard something the other day that was I thought was fascinating. I heard someone talking about how people who have been sort of refined in the fire, kind of, you would
Hmm.
think they would be complete bleeding hearts, but it tends to be that like we feel for other people because when I go back to Jamaica, which is often now. I mean, I go back 2, 3, 4 times a year easily. I always have like it's so funny. Always have money. Like $100 Jamaican bill doesn't even get you a lot, but I always have like loose change in the car. I own a home down there and a nice little villa on the coast. It's so beautiful. I'm looking forward to being back there in 2 weeks. But I'd have vehicles down there. But I try to help out. Talk this idea of even supporting local business. Well, it's all local. Everybody down there is like, and the place is doing much much better as a larger national community. It's not the place it was 50 years ago. So that's true. But still, you have people who are not standing up on their own 2 feet. And so I've been back to Jamaica as a physician, kind of volunteering time and working with organizations like Hope Worldwide to serve people. And it's not even a sweat. It's like nothing. It is a way of me saying thank you to God just for, because I don't know if you know this, but there's a thing called like survivor's guilt. It's where, why me? I
Hmm.
sometimes see the kids down there just and again, as a whole, the economy is higher and it's lifting a lot more boats, but you still see people down there who don't have the resources, don't have the connections, don't have the family around them, and they hit hard times. And that's the other thing in a place like that. You can't hide poverty. You see the poor people. They're baked in the sun. They can't hide their worn out clothes or worn out shoes or the really poor ones that have fallen in between the cracks. You could tell when they're destitute. Like even so to your point, living in a wealthy country like America, even the poor can hide. The relative poor in America, and poor has always been relative, but the relative poor in America can hide their poverty. There's
Hmm.
a wonderful story I know about several business people, but the ones that had the Nantucket juice thing, the nectar, Nantucket nectar, they talk about how they were essentially homeless and how hard it was to get their product out, and that they faked it until they made it, but they didn't have any resources. And I just think, oh, at least you could hide that you had nothing because you had
Yeah.
something to hide your nothing. When you go to certain places, and I've been to Haiti, I've been to Jamaica, I've been to Cambodia when it was really bad, you see poverty on top of poverty, how there's nothing to hide your poverty. There's nothing to fake. You are destitute, you're sleeping on the street, and there's no way to cover that up. And so, yeah, you're right. Poverty is relative, as is wealth. Wealth is relative, but I think of wealth not as how much you acquire, but your options. So I feel wealthy whenever I have a choice between not just once you have the power to choose, you have something that can get you from where you are to where you need to be. And I think um, I don't. I listen. In some ways, the people who are, as you say, griping and moaning about stuff, to you, you might think, ah, this is this is nothing, right? Is this a catastrophe or a crisis, or is it just you complaining? And for them, though, it is catastrophic. I heard a story about a 15-year-old boy who shot his parents because they took the TV out of his room.
Good
And
gracious.
yes, exactly. Now I would be like,
Yeah.
boy, that boy could have used some leather belts, right? Like that's inconceivable to me as a kid that I would have a TV in my room or have a TV at
Hmm.
all. Like I grew up in a house without electricity at times. I don't know what a TV in my room how would that condition me? But here's the thing, his suffering was still real, right? And it's sad that that's what brought on suffering for him. That's the thing he cannot abide, right?
Mm.
Can you imagine being so pampered that you can handle that? And so I do think a lot of people who complain, if it's coming from a sincere place, it doesn't make me angry. It makes me sad that, wow, this is. I heard a definition of depression, which is an inability to construct a future, an inability to almost mentally construct a future. Um, and I like that definition. It's not scientific. I know what the definition of depression is. I know what the DSM criteria is. But I like this idea that, what gets some people depressed is something in their own heads that's kind of like, it's not just a chemical imbalance. It really is like, because you meet people from other parts of the world and the same set of circumstances does not get them depressed. So it's more than circumstance. It has to be maybe the clash of circumstance alongside expectations. Like, I should not be here at such a point as this. Like, you don't expect me to live without a TV in my room, do you? Kind of. And for that person though, that's devastating. I can't see a life without
Hmm.
that. And some people would off themselves or off others, but the lack of imagination when someone has never had to survive at their own, efforts is sad. And so at this age, I can look back at it, Mark, and tell you that I am grateful for
Sure.
that refining in the fire because I've been able to survive things that I've seen other people just go, no, too much.
From the ashes, that's how we speak it. I'm going to bring you back to 13, coming to
Hmm.
United States, and your father was here. What was that like? What was those
Oh boy.
feelings? What was those sentiments?
So, so I was 13 when I left Jamaica. When I moved in with my dad, I was 14 by then, and actually a few weeks away from 15. And that's a tough age for anybody, right? Connecticut, New York, Cambodia, Jamaica. That's just a tough age. You're kind of, who am I going to be? What kind of person am I going to be? And your voice is changing. You don't even know what you sound like, and that's both physical and sort of metaphorical. Like, it just, you have to decide. And the idea of reinventing myself, I was trying to explain this to somebody recently, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We all have to sort of reinvent ourselves. Ask the caterpillar and the butterfly, right? You it's I'm stunned by what we can learn from nature, but is a butterfly faking a caterpillar? No, you go through a metamorphosis. Now with the caterpillar and the butterfly, it's very obvious. You go through a cocoon phase, and nobody may see the cocoon, but it's inside you, and you're figuring out, who am I going to emerge as? And I think one thing that's always been there, you asked about education, is I just understood it was important to do well in school. And so moving in to live with my dad, I can tell you, my older brother who was with me, he's 19 months older than me. He knew that this was a surprise to my dad. I did not. I remember my mom had handed him the number and said, "Call this number only after you've landed at JFK." And
Wow.
and it's so funny because after I lived there for a while and I got my license, I was used to be the one that used to drive people to and from the airport. And I remember my brother called the number. We landed around 9 in the night. My brother called the number, and my dad finally picked us up around 11:30 or so. He was remarried by now. He had some other kids at the house. It was a blended family. Some of my stepmom's kids were there, and they had kids together, and those were there. They're 10 years younger than me. I didn't know. Listen, none of this was like I was sitting in on the planning phase. So I can just tell you from my 14-year-old self that, just several things. I remember the altitude of the plane we were flying. It's so funny how my mind sort of fixated on the facts of the day. And we were flying, when you remember Eastern Airlines, that's now gone defunct. But Eastern Airlines flew us up we flew to from the Bahamas to Miami, and then from Miami, also Eastern Airlines, we landed in JFK. My brother made the phone call. I remember just looking outside the airport and seeing all these limos, and I'm like, because in Jamaica, only an important person would be in a limousine or like a town car, and apparently that's what they use for livery. There's just you could just get a limo, a big car, just to pick you up. Because I thought there was some dignitary coming in. It's just the size of the cars were stunning to me. That's one of the first thing my 14-year-old self noticed. is that
Hmm.
I'm coming from a place where it's mostly economy cars, small little Japanese cars, and you see big American steel, and you're like, the land of this is different. There's something different here, things like that. And then I remember when my dad came to pick us up at about 2.5 hours, 2 hours later. It was years later that I realized I was driving um, some family members to the airport about 3, 4 years later, and I was doing a lot of the driving. Um, and I said, "Oh, we should be there in 20 minutes." And I was like, "That's right. The airport is only 20 minutes away. Why did it take him 2 hours to come get us?" And then I realized, so that's the first sign that, wait, it took so long. I can't imagine what he had to explain, I guess, to his wife, like, look, well, maybe I had some kids or something, but they're at the airport now. Because I can't remember my brother explaining, no, we're at the airport at JFK. We're at the airport. So I could only hear my brother's side of the story. Like, I couldn't hear what he was saying. We're at the
Oh my.
airport. Yes, which airport? At JFK. Eastern Airline. We're at the airport. So he
Wow.
came, he got us. I told that story to my mother-in-law. She goes, "At least he came and got you," because it's like, yeah, I'm grateful for that. And I've told him so since. I was like, look,
Hmm.
because of that, you'll never have to go hungry or homeless or anything as long as I have somewhere to stay. Because I realized that, yeah, other people have stories where they would have been left at the airport because it actually was a round trip ticket. That's kind of how we got our like a couple week visa to do some shopping. So he came and picked us up, and I remember it's funny because my brother, man, he said something as we were going in the house because um, he, my dad was kind of giving us some like, look, you got to be circumspect, make yourself. I remember my brother saying something like, look, he says, we don't eat much and we don't take up a lot of space.
Dag.
And I'm like, he's making the case for us staying there.
Hmm. Hmm.
So he must have known
Hmm.
this because he's older, and maybe my
Okay.
mom said something to him, but I was just going along skinny, dumb, and happy, just
Wow.
I just was like, I didn't know what to expect. You just learn to roll with whatever comes. And when I heard him explain that, I realized he's kind of saying, because we had a ticket to return back to the way my mom did it was return back to the Bahamas within like a week and a half because the visa I think was only for a couple of weeks.
Hmm.
And yeah, yeah, and so
Hmm.
and that's again how much of this was just lucking out or the design. I just rolled with it, but I think my brother knew we were asking for like room and board basically. He's like, we don't eat
Hmm.
much and we don't take up a lot of space. And my dad brought us in, and now I'm a little bit upset because I don't want to be in this house because I had no say in the matter. But at the same time, I'm conflicted because they're living way better than I did, even in the Bahamas. They have phones and multiple TVs throughout the house and multiple cars. Even the Bahamas, we didn't have a car. And so now I'm like, this is nice, but I still don't want it. I don't know these people. I don't know any of these
Hmm.
people. I have no memory of spending, any days with my dad. I first met my dad when I was 11. He came to Jamaica to visit. That's the first time I met him. That it just to my conscious memory. I mean, I know I met him before he left. I was a year and change, if not a couple years old. But I don't remember any of that. Um, and now here I am living in a house with a stepmom. This is his second wife, a bunch of half brothers and stepsister, and it was just all that an empath could deal with. It's just
Man. That is for 14, 15-year old. That's a lot to take in.
it's a
Realistically, it's a lot
lot.
to
Yeah,
take in. Yeah.
yeah.
How did things from that point progress between you and your father?
So for me, it was much easier overtly harder internally. And what I mean by that is I can only contrast it with how my brother did. My brother, oh my gosh. Oh, I love him, but my gosh. Oh, so my brother just leaned into it. He called up all our friends in Jamaica, and oh man, I'm in New York. I'm in New York now. He had this whole "I told you" attitude. I told you I'm somebody. I got people in foreign. I had people overseas. He just leaned into it, and I'm like, no, dude, like be circumspect. Like I got that. Just
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, his demands started like, oh, I need. He would watch TV and he's like, I need designer jeans. He was just, whew. I love him, but
Hmm.
my gosh, and so I started hiking. I started going the other direction. I'm just like quiet as a church mouse. I just went to school, did my work, came back. And it was funny because you find your tribe wherever you go. You find people who have a blend of whatever attributes you value. So I found people who also valued schoolwork but weren't total like nerds or like still played sports. I think I played soccer, and I just, but yeah, my brother just found the in crowd, popular girls. Just, I remember my dad complaining about the long distance bill, and it was at a time where you could call across the street and it was long distance, and I don't think I ever used the phone to call anywhere. Do you know what I mean? I just
Mm-hmm.
yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. They put food in front of you. Thank you very much. Your turn to clean up. I clean up. I think I wanted to just be under the radar to like kind of figure out what's going on. Um, it was awkward. It was tough. I remember, I remember my step siblings would be like loving up to my dad, which is weird because they had no blood relation. They would say us laugh, almost like they were trying to make me feel just. I'm like, you go have him, it
Wow.
was, I, he tried to hug me. I'm like, kid, excuse me, I'm sorry. Can you, like, not?
Man.
Like, I I didn't feel connected to any of the people. I was cordial. It's so funny because I heard my mom and dad talking one time on the phone after my mom pulled this little stunt on my dad. And my dad said something to the effect of, Arbery's just busybody, just into everything, doing everything, just unbelievable, just a wanderlust to him, breaking all the rules almost. I never did drugs, but but he just la joie de vie, I think the French would call it, just the joy of being a teenager. At the time, he was probably 16, 17. Yeah, yeah, exactly. He was like 17 and just living it up in New York and letting all his friends who thought he was a nobody know that he is somebody. And I didn't call a single soul. I just try to be circumspect. In fact, when I first went there, I used to call my dad sir, which nobody else called him. And I think he was uncomfortable with it, but that's not why I was doing it.
Hmm.
I just, it was a statement I was making. It was a formality of yes, sir, no, sir. And I remember one time hearing his wife kind of make fun of it. I said, yes, sir. He said, why don't you clean up so and so? I said, yes, sir. Which is something in my culture you would do no problem. And as I didn't walk away right away, they didn't know I was still here. And I heard his wife was like, yes, sir. No, sir. Because my younger brothers who were 10 years younger, they were about 5 at the time I was 15, they never referred to him that way. I mean, just it's a different culture. I'm not saying they disrespected him, although I had evidence later on they did. But that's not. I just took it. The formality I carried around me was also an emotional, like arm's length.
I can
I
understand
remember
that.
one time, one of my older brothers like, "Yo, it's our dad, right? It's our dad." I'm like, "Okay." Like, there's a difference between a father and a dad, right? He's not daddy. Everyone's daddy. No, he's our father. I admit that, but I don't. He's a nice
Hmm.
man. But and I remember thinking this in, it wasn't maybe college, but maybe med school. just like forgiving myself for not, I wasn't faking it. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't like trying to fake it to make him feel better. I just wasn't emotionally close to him. I respected him because I'm in his house. I listened to him. I complied by his rules. Like if we had holiday, he would take me to the. I actually loved that. He delivered packages as a courier in Manhattan, and on holidays I just follow him to the city. I love being in New York City, and I helped him with packages, and so we grew. We honestly, I grew to develop a relationship with him, but I wasn't faking it, and I had my own voice. But if I felt something disagreeable, I kept it to myself
Okay.
until I felt like I was in a place to say I don't agree with that. But I found out later on after taking my own Myers Briggs things that my INFJ personality values respect, not just like as a currency, not just people giving it to me, but me initiating. I wanted him to know I respected him, not love, not a great affection, just respected him. Because I respected that he took me in and he's taking care of me, and so that was a difference. He later told me about this, that I never had a sense of entitlement. As some of my other brothers were like, look, you missed many years, so you got some making up to do kind of attitude. I never took. I just honestly, I anything, yes, sir, thank you, sir. I remember being in college and he's trying to figure out how are you paying for this, and I'm like, I was gonna borrow money until my nose bled, and and I remember him trying to give me money. So took his wallet out and tried to give me money. I said, no, no, no. Trust me, I could have used that money,
Well,
but
why not
I was
take
just
it?
like,
Why not
no,
take it?
there was a kind. I don't know what it was. It wasn't just foolish pride. Hey, the amount of money he was handing me was nothing in comparison to like what my tuition was going to be or anything like that. But it could have been pocket money. But
Hmm.
I just no, thank you, sir, thank you, and I just told him
Okay.
to keep it. And it's. I later found out he really admired a lot of that, and we had some good
Hmm.
talks. Like I pushed through, and only as an older person, maybe when I was in med school, I started to like. Okay, I feel like I'm a man now. I feel like I could tell him, but it wasn't like I was going to curse him out. It was more like I could tell him the journey I had been through, and that's when I found out. He had a tremendous amount of respect himself
Hmm.
for kind of the way I carried myself. I remember him sending me a credit card when I was undergrad, and he told me I couldn't give that to your brother, the one that wanted the designer jeans,
Hmm.
because he wanted me to build my own credit. And so he goes, "Here's a credit card, and use it in emergencies." And I was like, "Okay." He sent me the card, and I had it. I didn't even touch it. And then a year later, I went back for the summer, and he's like, "Did you get the card I sent you?" And I thought he meant like some sort of birthday card or something. I honestly was thinking, he said, "Did you get the card I sent you?" So I think he sent some, I don't know, Father's Day card. I have no idea what he's talking about. So I said no, but I was being honest. Like I don't know what he was talking about. And then he later asked me again. He goes, "I sent you a blue card. It was I don't know what it was, but it was some sort of a Visa card." I was like, oh, yeah." And he goes, "You got it?" And I had gotten it like the year before, and it had no balance on it. So he was
Hmm.
confused how he sent me a credit card to help me through college, and I didn't put a balance on it. I was like, "Oh, I guess it's just sitting there, right?" And then he goes, "No, man,
Yeah.
use it, build your credit." I was like, "Because it's in my name." And he
Hmm.
later explained to me, I could not show that kind of generosity to my wanderlust brother, to your wanderlust brother. And I was like, "Oh, okay." So he sees us as individuals, which was fine. Wasn't my intention, but he started expressing how he felt like he could trust me and all that stuff. And I was like, "Okay, good on you."
That's understandable. Here's a
Yeah,
question that comes to mind because
sure.
a lot of times our relationship, good or bad, with our father. I'm not saying your relationship was bad with your dad, but when we have our own sons, we
Yeah,
do a few things. We steal a little bit from the relationship with our dad. We add some other
mm,
stuff on. We
yeah,
we kind of make we put it together. So how
yeah.
was the relationship with your dad? How was that influenced with the relationship you built with your son?
Wow. All right. I think that's a great question, Mark. I think the first thing I just was intentional about was being present. None of this. will send you money stuff. The presence. I don't know if it's the pheromones. I don't know. It's you got to be there, you know. And for me, this is from the gospel according to. So my
Mm.
life experience was you got to show up. You got to. Um, my son was born first, so and then 2.5 years later, his sister was born. But it's important. We took family vacations together. Oh my gosh, my favorite time in the whole world um, was just throwing my whole family in the car and hitting the road together. And it just the other thing was they had their own room. And I don't think they understood. It didn't mean to them what it meant to me that I could provide for them their own room. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Because we grew up sometimes sleeping on the floor in somebody else's room. A luxury was to throw a mattress on the floor. Um, and because things are so impoverished, I had recognized a while back that the people who were my friends who lived better had a dad in the home. This was my kid logic. I figured this out at like 4.5, 5 years old. Four, it wasn't quite five, man. I knew where I was living. And we lived in like, we called it a housing scheme, but it was like a subdivision, right? All the houses are exactly the same. And my mom, as a teacher, qualified for one of these houses at some sort of discount, you know, rate. And I remember we walked up and down the street of this housing scheme, some houses were clearly better appointed than others. And the ones who had a car in the driveway, or we called it the garage. I was going to say a car in the garage, but the car porch. The ones that had a car in the garage, a TV there, the better looking houses had a man there. And in my 4-year-old brain, I figured out it was a there was a correlation between men present and luxury.
Wow.
It's so funny because I remember thinking, I guess the house, because I still didn't know how everything worked, but I remember thinking maybe the men were attracted. Like I could see a guy come into a house to live there because it had a TV and a
The
car.
TV. Here
Like
we
I,
go with the TV.
like I just remember noticing that as a 4-year-old, 4.5-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, the nicer houses had dudes there, had guys there, grown men. And the house like ours, which barely had furniture in it, or actually for quite a while we had no furniture in ours. Like those houses, there was no man there, and so part of my unspoken covenant with myself was just if we're going to be poor, we're going to be poor together. I'm going to be there if I need to defend y'all. I never wanted my kids to feel like they were not welcome somewhere when they have a place they can call their own. If there's a place in this world that's yours, it's your room. I even told them you can't enter each other's room without asking permission. Like little things like that. That doesn't mean that much to them. They just think, oh, you're just being polite. It's like, no, I want you to feel like there's a place in the world that you're welcome. Like I don't enter their rooms without knocking. Can I come in? Can we talk? Because that's the opposite of what I had. Like there are times I felt like there was no place in the world for us. The
Hmm.
kind of poverty we had, and there are times when we're staying with people, and they made it very clear: you do not have privilege here as the other residents, as the people who actually live here. You can't sit on the sofa. You can't come in through the front door. You have to use the back door. Can't just open the fridge. I get it. I get it. And so I remember one time my daughter wanted to have a sleepover, and I was like, I was in provide and protect mode, and I never wanted my kids to be at anybody's house who didn't want them at their house, because I have been at people's house who I could tell didn't want me at their house, but their house had a TV, or things were nice at their house or something. But we were just another mouth to feed sometimes. So it's like, okay, go on home to your house now. Even if they were being nice about it, I would just be like, wow.
Wow.
So the part that was borrowed though was my dad was a hard worker. Credit to him. He, and then we were raised by my grandfather, his father. So my father's father, I remember him saying, "Never let the sun catch you in bed." So there was a thing that came down through the line of just I do not come from lazy stock, and neither my parents. and maybe that's a society that you had to tread water at the very least. You couldn't just float, right? So both my parents are hardworking people, and so that's borrowed. That I got from my dad. Like he'd be even on the weekends, he'd be up. By the time I wake up, he was working on his car. He would change parts on his car. He had a shed out. He had tools to fix tools. So I proudly imitated that from him. He also was a simple man. You give him a nice fish dinner, a stiff white rum drink, cut with some coconut water. He really was pleasable. Like as I grew up to just realize he didn't have that wanderlust. He literally could. Now that don't mean he didn't get in trouble because he chased his version of skirts. If I'm
Hmm.
not being too euphemistic, that got him in a lot of trouble. But he loved his music. Like he had a whole record. He had a little thing under the stairs where he kept all his records. He loved music, and he just turn it out, crank some music, sit there with his one drink of white rum, and just breathe it in. I think I got that from him too. Just being able to be content with the simplest thing. He was unpretentious as a person. He never put on an air like he's better. He talks to anybody. He flirted with any woman. He was an equal opportunity offender, an equal. But I do like that honesty and simplicity about him as a man, and so I try to imitate that. The part I did not imitate was, look, man, you can't just lay eggs and walk away and leave them. We're not chickens. You have to you gotta kind of even the mother hen. Somebody has to be there, and so the part that I kind of corrected for and probably overcorrected in my own household is trying to be present, trying to show up for the plays, trying to show up for everything, trying to be there when there are questions, something bothering you. So that was like a conviction I had.
Beautiful. Realistically, man, I sit and I listen, and some stuff I may have heard before, but I heard more today. And then I look at who you are and what you do. Here's a
Mm.
young man. I'm gonna call him a young man. He's not much younger than me. He's a little younger than me. Here's a young man that basically has a generous heart, and that's not only his profession; it's just who he is. He spoke earlier about when he goes back home to Jamaica, and he didn't say this, and he might get mad at me for saying it, but I'll say it anyway. This young man not only goes back to Jamaica, he flies himself back to Jamaica to help people out. He flies himself. He has a business, a service where he basically help people with their health. So I point that out to say, not to basically gloat about him. I point out to show that look where he came from. Look how he came up. He could walk around and be bitter. He could walk around and be mean. He could walk around and done a lot of different things. But with God's hand in his life and bringing him up from the ashes, he's turned into a remarkable man. God bless you, boss.
Man, I thank you. I appreciate it. Those are very kind words. I try to live up to the best of, and I appreciate you even giving God credit because I know. I mean, I just had an opportunity to speak at my church congregation, and that's the world to me. That's one. The other thing my mom taught me about is just faith. She introduced us to the importance of education and the importance of our faith, and so I try to live up to what I think my creator has called me to. If there's an opportunity, I'm on it because if I could see it, there's probably something he wants me to do with it. So I appreciate you saying
Hey man, you left me no other option. You left me no other option. I want to thank you for stopping by, man, and sharing your story. For some, it's interesting because some people run from sharing their stories, good or bad. But I'm
that.
happy that you feel great about yours to share, man. I appreciate it.
Mark, thank you so much, man. Hey, listen, if we could do this again, it's been a lot of fun. It's great talk with you. It's so fun. I've not had to share aspects of that story in a while. So sometimes hearing it at this stage of my life is like, yo, that's crazy, though. But yeah, but I do appreciate this opportunity. All right.
Yeah, we're definitely going to do it again. Hang tight. We're going to talk a little bit. Let me close the door on Elias Loft. We'll definitely talk a little bit. Once again, thank you for stopping by, folks. You know how I always say when I get out of here, God loves you and I love you too. Make sure you spread that love, though. Just don't keep it to yourself. We're here together real soon.